What's that?
What's up? Oh,
I didn't hear
sorry.
what they said.
I have to do YouTube live for about the next 20 minutes, but so come down and check things out very quickly. Sorry, my sister-in-law. I don't know if you ever met
Oh,
Alicia or not. She
can't
was at the
remember.
wedding. Angela's sister from Florida.
Yeah, vaguely I remember. I think. Yeah,
Okay.
good stuff.
She lives in Haines City, Florida.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, it's funny. I don't actually know. I'm still trying to figure out whether or not when I crank this up, like if it actually
Uh-huh.
starts our live thing like right away, or if it's like there's like a 10-second delay or a 15-second or a minute delay, or if it
Okay.
starts like at 8. But like I see my other thing is going, so I guess we're rocking and rolling. Even though
All right.
I think that's the only other
I'm
thing.
gonna
Anyway,
check. I'm gonna check it from my account. Let's
good
see.
stuff. Yeah, welcome
Uh,
to Common Mansplaining. What's up?
yes,
So if you
yes.
guys are just coming in the chat, if you can see us already, let us know. It's actually just turned 8, so I don't know if it's
Oh yeah,
if
I
it's
think it looks good.
perfect. 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 So sweet. Before I get started, happy 4th of July to everybody. Welcome aboard and happy birthday, America, as we go into the 250th year of the Union, which is no small feat. As far as I know, that's like it's in the top 20 longest standing empires ever. And might
Well,
even be top 10.
I don't know if we've been an empire for 250 years,
Fair
but
enough.
yeah,
But yeah, yeah.
but of course, but a republic, right? A republic has not existed since 2000 BC, the Roman Republic, which lasted 400 years, right? Supposedly.
Right.
So, so we're coming up on that, but yeah, the new Democratic Republic is we're breaking records for that.
How do you do that? How do you have like a little king #1 next to you? Is that like, are you the #1 commenter on this channel? Is that it, or
I
did
don't
some
know. I don't
maybe
know. I guess I must.
how'd you get a
Um,
little? That's pretty cool. That's pretty
I got
cool.
a
Well,
little
anyway,
first. I got a little first.
so we're back today to talk about illegal immigration once again. I feel like we do this every
well,
so often, and you know the
well,
reason we do this.
we can talk about aliens in general, like not even illegal, but those who come in for refugees that ultimately become legal. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, right. And I think part of the reason we keep going back over this is because it's like no matter how many times we do, it's like I'll still hear the same old tired arguments from the left regarding, like this is just what it's like no matter what I say regarding what the law is, regarding, what the truth is behind, what this administration does and stuff like that. It's like I still hear the same like narrative, the same propaganda over and over again. And I think part of it is that there is a fundamental psychological difference between the left and the right, of course. And that part of it is that, like, on the right, there's this more principled kind of center, right? And so they have
law and
these
order.
right rules like law, right, like law and order. And yet on the left, they're more willing to, they have the same principle, ironically, but they're willing to compromise it, which is odd, right? And I being on the right, I don't understand how that psyche works, because when I have a principle like, law and order, I'm just like, all right, this is the principle. Like the whole reason for me having a principle is that I don't compromise it, right? Like that's the entire purpose of having
Yeah.
that like boom, this is sealed in stone, right? Like
Yeah,
we're gonna follow the law,
you have preferences,
right?
and which can change, but principles are like, yeah, this is how I view the world, and yeah,
Exactly, right. Like, and then yeah, no matter, and it's interesting because I'll ask the left, I'm like, for example, do you believe in the Constitution? And they're like, yeah, and I'm like, well, then how come you don't want to follow it here, here, and here? They're like, well, and then they'll give me an excuse, and I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. If do you
yeah,
believe in the? I just asked you, do you believe in the Constitution? If you don't believe in the Constitution, then say
no,
no. Say no. I believe instead in this, and
yeah,
this. And
yeah.
that's fine. But like,
Interpretation. They want judges to say like the Constitution is malleable to whatever circumstances, and we say it's no, it's pretty firm and locked in. I think, again, and this is for those who've watched my channel, one of my themes is it's emotional versus cognitive reasoning. And the
Yep.
left has succeeded in making opposition to Donald Trump or the GOP, the Republican Party, a very emotional thing. And
Right.
so they don't have to announce, they don't want you to stop and think about all the stuff they're asking you to protest or object or get upset about. They just want your anger and upset. And this is one, right? Because it is our Western values value human life.
Yep.
Right. And we value, especially in the 20th century when we overthrew Hitler, when we stood up to the despots in communist areas, communist Vietnam, China, Russia, Eastern Europe, we would take their refugees, Cuba, take their refugees, and even if they weren't well behaved, like Cuban refugees often were criminals and people that had a lot of problems that Castro would send to us. We still felt like it was still American for us to try to take these people in and see what we could do.
Right.
So and I still feel like personally, we as individuals, the common man, when we interact with the people, individuals, then we should be personally kind to them like anyone, that we should value their human life. And certainly we're not trying to end their life.
Right.
But the thing is the 21st century, 2025 is not the same as 1960 or 1985. And the situation's different. And their expectations, what we on this channel have for our government versus what we would have for us as individuals.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And the government, it's that law and order. If there's a law, we live by laws. If they don't like the law, change the law.
Right.
But until then, right, people should know this is their expectation. This law will be used. And so it shouldn't shock people. They shouldn't be clutching their pearls that and one of the big things though, because we have due process, because we have constitutional, is there's ways people get a chance to make their case and say like, well, we know the law, but I feel like I'm an exception to to the law for the following reasons or whatever, that I should be granted residency or whatever to come here. And so we allowed that kind of system to exist for a long time. The people could come and make their case.
Right.
But what's ended up happening, and we tend to be fairly good about that. We kind of almost romanticized the idea of the immigrants. People talk about we're a nation of immigrants, even though immigration is very different in the 18th and 19th centuries,
of course,
or even early 20th centuries than it is today in the whole world, but especially in America. But they romanticize that and the strength and that good people come in here, so the brain drain. But what they don't see is that people have effectively gamed the system and overwhelmed us. And the American people have finally just said, look, we were in favor of this to a certain level, but we're being overwhelmed. And when we try to even push back common sense, like, hey, maybe, we should have deportations or a little bit, right? We're called racist. We're like really vile things in the left, under Biden especially, found no circumstances that they could justify any deportations, which is very, very far left.
Yeah, I saw this.
Yeah,
no, go ahead. Finish up there.
So when we go from common sense saying like, yeah, we'd like to welcome you here, but we're just a little overwhelmed. What do we do? And we'll get to some things that I've read about later. But this is I think an emotional thing versus a reasoning thing.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, I saw this interview with Steve Miller the other day. That was like this CNN anchor or something thought they had him cornered. Right? They're like, there was this immigrant who had come over here. They called him an undocumented migrant. Right? Is what the words they use. Right? Yeah. And they're like, but this person was originally investigated because somebody else had kind of like turned them in a weird way, like had basically made a threat on their behalf, right? But like led breadcrumbs back to that guy, so that the person would be like, deported or whatever, right? And of course,
Sure.
they investigated and found out that they were being set up, that it wasn't their threats. But they're like, the CNN anchor's like, so will you have that person deported, seeing as how they've been set up? And Steve Miller's like, well, are they an illegal immigrant? Are they illegal? Are they not? Right? And she's like, well, all the rest of that stuff, you can it doesn't matter, right? Like,
Yeah.
I get
As
that
far as
you've
the government
thrown it
has
in.
to obey the law. Yeah.
Right. I get that you toss it all in to like try to obscure and obfuscate the emotional content behind this, but at the end of the day, it's just, we investigated something, we found out this person isn't supposed to be here, and that's it. Like, and that's the difference between a principal and like, operating emotionally, right? Because it's like you said, it personally, on a one-to-one level, am I going to offer charity and grace to every single person I see? Absolutely, right? Because
Yeah.
I don't know. First of all, I don't know who's an illegal immigrant. Not, I don't care.
Yeah.
Right? That's not part of my charity. Right? Again, I have a different principle that guides my charity. Right? It's got nothing to do with whether the person is black, brown, Cuban, Asian, whatever. It has nothing to do with whether they're citizen, non-citizen. I don't care. I'm going to be a generous person no matter what, because that's just one of my principles. But by the same token, if I find out that they are in fact breaking the law, I'll be generous and charitable, and then I would have them deported, because that's just the principle, right? Again, and I know that
it's
sounds
also,
harsh,
yeah.
but it's
Oh,
not.
yeah. And I would also say that being deported to Mexico in 2025 is not the same thing as being deported to Mexico in even 1960 or
Right.
things like that. It's a lot more developed country. Yes, they have cartel violence. Every country we have parts of our inner cities that are super violent, where and so even going back to these countries aren't as bad as they say. Now, criminal gangs deported to San Salvador. So sort of in the past, people deported, once they got to another country, they just sort of be left loose on the streets. Well, the president of San Salvador has seen where that led to. The criminal gangs became so well organized and just expected to be released on the streets of the country. He's not doing that anymore. So he's actually imprisoning people, which is and has led to huge benefits. And that's also one of the things I want to talk about. So San Salvador is a much safer country and is starting to grow in wealth because he's taken criminal gangs seriously. Law and order, right? And one of the things too in America, so Trump's deportations in real numbers, even though he set all these goals and been very vocal, very clear about this, in real numbers are still less than Biden deported last year between February and June. Right?
Yep. I saw that there was a thing in Mexico where they were setting up like all of these like deportation stations, and like they're like, well, nobody's being really that many people deported. And I saw another figure that said, one of the narratives that I keep getting fed back to me is that like Trump is just like going into random like schools and churches and stuff and just throwing people out in it. And do you know that like a good 35 to 50% of the people that he's deporting have other criminal records in addition to just like that? Proves that he's obviously targeting criminals. He's not targeting random people at like baseball games and stuff. He's not going to like labor temp agencies and just seeing if he can scoop somebody up in the sifter. No, he's got people that he's like targeting, and then he just happens to scoop others up, because otherwise you wouldn't get those percentages. They're just wouldn't even close.
Well, yeah, and the fact is, right, that illegal like criminals can be hiding out in legitimate jobs. Absolutely. Right? In schools, things like that. And rather than like, hey, this person was working in custodian in a school and he had a criminal record and all these things and was illegally entered the country, right? Didn't go through whatever, and we're detaining him. And everybody, rather than praising that we would say is praiseworthy. Oh, you took a potentially dangerous person with very little ties to our community out of a sensitive area, school. And they're like, no, he's just a, and then the left sort of ennobles, paints this person a noble custodian or something like that, right? I think people have see through that. The common man is not deceived by that anymore. That worked for a long time, but we voted for Trump. This is what people have voted for, and it's because people were gaming the system. It was like it was too much, you know.
Yeah.
And one of the effects that we're seeing, there's not the numbers of people being deported. The people, it's not this big, crazy deportation that Mexico is set up for, but people aren't going north anymore, right?
Right.
And the gangs have really quieted down their activity, because if they act up, they know they're going to get an ICE raid, right?
Absolutely.
And so they're lying low. People who are in the country illegally are really trying to be not break laws, right? And so what it's done is that let me go.
Yeah.
It's raised blue collar wages.
Oh
right?
yeah. Absolutely.
Right? Something
Already
that
like
never
what,
happened under Reagan, never happened under
like-
Reagan, never happened under Bush, never happened under Clinton, never happened under George Bush again, never happened under Obama. Did happen under Trump's first term, but it's happened again. That blue collar wages are going up, and this is
just so everybody can quantify this. We're looking at like 2% in 5 months.
Yeah.
That is the fastest we've seen in like 50 years. Like almost no kind of wage growth like that have we seen in my entire lifetime, like ever.
Yeah.
This is the fastest in my lifetime. In 5 months,
we've
had more wage growth. Yeah, it's just insane. I mean, like, and so people don't. It's one thing to see, inflation going up and wage growth trying to keep up with it, which is what it was struggling to do under Biden, because inflation was like 7-8% or something. But now we've almost had the entire wage growth of a year in 5 months. Like we're way above pace, and so one of the other things too is that you mentioned the difference between like individual treatment versus government treatment. It's also like there's also a difference in like the way what people forget is that when a government can't make all these exceptions. One of the things that I liken this to is when I used to work at a lot of my 9-to-5 jobs, there's like very, very strict HR regulations. And the reason for that is, again, to protect, to have relatively equal treatment under the law, right? In this case, in these jobs, it would be equal treatment under the job regulations, but the government has to do that under the law, right? You can't just make all these little exceptions just because you have this emotional heart tug every 5 seconds. They have to treat people the same, even though one person, you might feel more for, or one person you might not. That's not the basis around which the law goes, right? So if the government has to apply an even-handed keel across the board, right? They can't just pick and choose who they decide to let slide, break laws and stuff like that. No, if you break the law, the government's got to look out for the citizens first, because that's who they owe their responsibility to. That's who they owe their fiduciary responsibility to. That's who they owe their legal responsibility to. I mean, because we're the people that vote them into office. We're the people that they are responsible for. We're the people. Without us, there would be no need for a government, right? Like, you'd be.
Well, what a lot of people, so the elites, especially the degreed elites, decry that if there was any limit placed on this illegal immigration flood, that it would be catastrophic to our economy, to our ability to build buildings, or to do maintain our yards or whatever. And what we've seen is it's not
Right.
The economy is humming along, right? S&P 5 corporations have never been more valuable. Blue collar wages are going up. This is all what we wanted to see. We're like, let's see if we have reduced illegal immigration for a while, what the effect is.
Yep.
And if it's really bad, let's make some changes. It's not really bad. And so we want to continue doing this. Now, the left, right, they're against this, right? And so they're trying to say that these are very reasonable, common sense actions, expectations of a government to enforce laws, but they're trying to paint them as draconian, as mean-spirited, as tyrannical, authoritarian, totalitarian. And they're not. They're just, normal policing that every president's done, right? We've seen less deportations on real terms than Biden, right? Which is crazy, right?
Right.
So,
what
we're going to see is, right, so they're trying to drum up, they're trying to make, right? The detention center in Florida sound worse than it is. Like we don't have cities all throughout South Florida. Like we're putting them in uninhabitable places just because Trump makes a few jokes.
Right.
Right. Or trying to say like, hey, there are these Afghans we need to get here because they helped our troops out in Afghanistan, and they should have they're being tortured by the Taliban. And we need to get them out of there. Here.
Yeah.
It's family members or extended family of the people that helped our troops.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of these people have shown to be bad actors, and they need to be more heavily vetted. We are still bringing people there, but it's more slowly than I want, and that wouldn't be illegal, right? But the process, right? Marco Rubio says, right, we're just going to be a lot more thorough in our vetting, right? Just because you were a family member of somebody that helped our troops or translated or did something heroic for us, normally, right, we're going to make sure that you're still a good dude and safe to be in America, and that's going to take a long time. And the Taliban is not killing and torturing these people because they want to still maintain legitimacy. They're trying to actually at this point stabilize the government and not be a sponsor of terror. We'll see where that goes. It's not exactly how we would want Afghanistan to go, but they have not been as bad as the left would try to portray them.
Of course,
so
yeah.
all common sense stuff, but if you don't look at it closely, it's portrayed as that we're being inconsistent or that we're being heartless when we're not.
Right. And again, there are other So as long as you understand that there's principles and then there's sub principles and there are things like that. I mean, one of the things that I like, I'll run into this a lot in politics, political conversation. Right, I'll say something like, "Oh, we all have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of property." Right, and they'll say, "Well, what about when someone takes taxes and they're taking your property?" It's like, well, okay, there's other principles that guide that, right? Just because I don't state all of my principles all at the same time doesn't mean that there aren't other principles that guide it. There are definitely principles that handle each one of these situations. And I mean, yeah, a lot of this is just overblown. A lot of this is like, I mean, I'm seeing people like compare, Alcatraz to like, the little mini detention centers that ICE has. And I'm like, come on, it's ridiculous.
Look, I'm not happy about the level that I'm taxed, but they went and they changed the Constitution to allow it, right? These are laws on the books, and they're laws that can be changed, right? Yeah. But they are laws enacted. They weren't whimsy. There wasn't some saying, I just feel like you should be paying this amount, right? There are laws that's established, and we've talked about the New York City mayor candidate, right, who is an immigrant, children of immigrants, romanticize this notion. The left has just embraced him, right? He wants to, set taxation levels simply based. Against the Constitution, and then but I would know at the end of the day, our laws, our taxation laws, would protect me against his crazy ideas. He might want to tax me like crazy, but without laws, right? Constitutional laws limited by the Constitution, he's got to still abide by that Constitution, my rights as a citizen.
Right. Yeah, I was just going to reiterate one of the things you said earlier too is that a lot of people romanticize this like concept of like an immigrant, like an alien, right? Like when they come over here and it seems like they're they're cool and they're exotic and they're just adding to our glorious diversity in the melting pot and everything sounds great, right? But it's like you said, like it's a completely different story from like somebody who came over here like in 1840. Because they were trying to make a better life for their family. And they came here under the expectation that there was going to be no handout. There's going to be no assistance. Like they were lucky if they had a family member here already to like give them a hand. But otherwise, they were coming here to work their butt off. to make
Yeah.
something happen. As opposed to like people that come across the border nowadays, they're thinking, I'm getting free health care because they can just show up to the emergency room. I'm getting this, I'm getting that, I'm getting this, I'm getting a social, like, come on, guys. Like, that's a completely different game. It's like a whole different ball game. And like, we like to romanticize, like, and say, oh, we're a nation of immigrants, forgetting that immigrants and settlers are two different things, by the way.
Yeah.
And like, the immigrants of today are completely different from the immigrants of yesteryear, and we've got to understand that this is not the same type of thing, right? And especially, golly, God forbid, immigrants that actually aren't even declaring themselves, that just show up, unannounced, creep across the fence or climb something, or it's night and day. Night and day.
Well, yeah, we created, I mean, America being just this land that was free from the oppression that the old world had was enough to bring people here. They knew they would work, they would work brutally hard their whole life, but the hopes that their children would have a little bit better chance than they would have in their old country, right? Now we created, with all of these incentives, created a perverse sort of incentive where people would come here without even really giving it a shot in their own country. For anything, right? So we'd have these big caravans, people coming through, and Mexico doesn't even want them. Mexico's, the southern border of Mexico, they don't want these people coming through. They don't want them coming to their country. Their border integrity matters to them. And so Trump just wants to de-emphasize that and not have it be so such an attraction. That the people who come here are those who are in a position to come here and succeed, or those who are in a position where we need to, and that we can do that in numbers that we can sustain and can give them a chance to integrate, right? The numbers were just crazy. And it's not that we don't value individuals, but we cannot take on 10 million people, right, in 5 years and do it well. Right. So a correction is necessary. Again, it's not that we hate or we're xenophobic or we just right. We got the exoticness. We love their food. We love their culture. But the numbers that they come here, we just want them to do it the right way. Stand in line. Give us your name at the border. Obey our laws. Don't try to steal or hurt or be that. If you can't do that, you're not ready for America. Maybe you mean if you want to prep, if you're not ready quite for America yet, there's Canada. It's sort of like the minor league America, where you can go to Canada, and then once you're really ready, okay, now I'm ready to go to the big leagues, to the U.S.
Just whatever you do, don't get attached to their political systems, because they're sadly lacking that department.
Before you come to the U.S., just get make sure you can acclimate in Canada before you come here.
Right. Yeah, guys,
they get the door wide open.
That's really all I had for people today. I mean, I just wanted to dispel some of the myths. But one thing I wanted to mention before we get on out of here is we're having trouble keeping our visibility. I think part of it was because we had some rough marketing, and we need your help out there. If you watch this and you are in a position to give us a hand, help share some of our videos, help get us off the ground, because we're having some trouble. We need YouTube to see as many positive signals as it can, right? So anytime you share this video with somebody, that helps. Anytime you watch the video through to the end, if you can, watch my shorts all to the end, our short videos all the way to the very end. That improves the average view duration. And if you see one of our videos, do us a favor and click on it, like and subscribe, and that will only help us get off the ground, and we desperately need that help. So thanks everybody for watching. We really appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time on Common Mansplaining.
All right, Eddie. Good show.
Later on, brother.
Good.